My name is Ava Moreno, and I just turned 18 3 days ago. If you've ever learned what it feels like to disappear inside your own family, to be loved out of duty, not affection, then you'll understand how a single night can burn the last of your childhood away. For months, I'd planned my birthday party like it was a symbol of everything I'd worked for. The one day I could exist without being overshadowed by my sister Amanda. She's 23, with that kind of beauty that makes people behave softer around her. Perfect hair, perfect laugh, perfect timing for every moment that could have been mine. It sounds childish, maybe, but when you grow up as the other daughter, even your joy feels like borrowed space. That Saturday morning, I was stringing up fairy lights across our Scottsdale backyard, the sun already fierce enough to bake the grass silver. Mom was helping me with the table settings. Dad was checking the grill. Everything felt almost normal. I didn't know they'd already canceled everything. Amanda wasn't even supposed to be here. She was meant to fly out to Los Angeles for some influencer event she'd been planning for weeks. But the weather decided otherwise. A line of thunderstorms across the southwest grounded all flights, and just like that, her plans, her precious plans, were ruined. The house had been unbearable ever since. My parents treated her like glass about to crack, whispering through conversations, patting around her moods like servants around a sleeping queen. By noon, Amanda came downstairs in her silk robe, holding her phone like a microphone. "I can't believe this," she complained. "Everyone's posting from LA and I'm stuck here. It's not fair." Mom murmured something about how sorry she was, how maybe they could reschedule. Amanda didn't answer. She just glanced at the decorations around the patio. The cake, the balloons, the banner that said 18 and fearless. And something cold flickered in her expression. "If I can't have fun," she said finally, "then neither should she." Her voice carried through the house like a sentence being delivered. I didn't hear those words until later. By the time I came downstairs again, my parents had already done it. Texted relatives, called my friends, and told everyone the party was canceled. Their excuse? That I was sick. A migraine. They even told people not to contact me. Meanwhile, I was outside arranging cupcakes, thinking everyone was just running late. When the sky turned amber and the lights began to glow, I checked my phone again. No messages. No, "where should I park?" texts. No, "can't wait to see you." Just silence. By 8 o'clock, the silence became a weight pressing down on my chest. At 9, it cracked. I walked into the living room where my parents were watching Netflix like nothing had happened. "Mom, Dad, where is everyone?" Mom paused the show. Dad looked guilty before she even spoke. "Sweetheart," she began softly, "we canceled the party." I stared at her. "You, what?" "It didn't feel right celebrating while Amanda's so upset about her trip," she continued. "She's been through a lot this week." "She's 23, not 5, I snapped. "It's my 18th birthday. You planned this, not me. You ordered the food, you invited everyone." Dad raised his voice, sharp enough to cut mine off. "Keep your voice down, Ava, you'll wake your sister." That did it. My anger stopped being a sound and became a shape. "You canceled my birthday so she could nap?" I said quietly. Mom wrung her hands, whispering about Amanda's fragile emotional state. Fragile. That word again. Amanda had been fragile since she learned how to cry on command. "I've spent my whole life stepping aside for her," I said. "And you still think she's the victim?" Before either of them could answer, footsteps came from the stairs. Amanda appeared in her robe, hair perfectly brushed, phone still in hand. "What's all the yelling about?" she asked sweetly, like she hadn't detonated the evening herself. "You know exactly what," I said. "You told them to cancel my party." Her smile didn't falter. "I didn't tell them. I just said it would be cruel to celebrate when I'm clearly in no state for festivities. But I guess empathy isn't your strength." I laughed, but it came out cracked. "Empathy? You ruined my birthday because your flight got canceled." Amanda's eyes glinted. "Maybe if you weren't so self-centered, you'd understand that the world doesn't revolve around your little milestones." That's when I snapped. The months of swallowed resentment, the years of being told to be quiet, to be kind, to be patient, all of it broke loose. I lunged at her, shoving her back against the stair railing. She screamed. I screamed louder. Dad pulled me off while Mom yelled my name, her voice shrill with horror, not because her daughters were fighting, but because Amanda's hair was tangled. And then, a sound that froze everyone. The doorbell. For a moment, none of us moved. Then Dad straightened his shirt and went to answer it. Standing on the porch was Grandpa William. 6 feet of quiet authority, a retired defense attorney who still carried the air of a man used to cross-examining lies. His white polo was perfectly pressed, his gaze sharper than any courtroom light. "What in God's name is going on here?" he demanded. The living room fell silent except for Amanda's uneven breathing. Something inside me, a strange mix of shame and defiance, pushed me forward. "Grandpa," I said, my voice trembling. "They canceled my birthday, for her." William looked from me to my parents, then to Amanda, who tried to compose herself. "That can't be true," he said slowly. Dad opened his mouth to explain, but I kept talking. The words spilled out like a confession years overdue, about the favoritism, the sacrifices, the quiet humiliations that made up my childhood. How I'd always been told to step aside. How Amanda got everything, even this night. By the time I finished, the only sound was the hum of the air conditioner. My grandfather's expression changed. Confusion, disbelief, then fury. He turned to my parents. "Is this true?" They didn't answer. "I've been sending you money for 3 years," he said coldly. "Thousands of dollars to keep your business afloat because you told me you were struggling. And this is how you've been using it? To raise one daughter like a queen and treat the other like a ghost?" Amanda tried to interject, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "Grandpa, it's not like that. You don't understand." He cut her off with a glance. "No, Amanda, you don't understand. You've been allowed to believe the world exists to cushion you. But that ends tonight." Then he looked at me. "Ava, go pack your things. You're coming with me." Mom gasped. Dad stammered something about overreacting, but William had already turned toward the door. And for the first time in 18 years, someone was choosing me. I ran upstairs, tears blurring my vision as I grabbed my suitcase and stuffed in clothes, books, the bracelet Grandma had given me before she died. Downstairs, I could hear my parents pleading, bargaining, not for me, but for the money they were about to lose. When I came back down, Grandpa was waiting by the doorway. He didn't look at them again, just opened the door and said quietly, "You don't deserve her." As we stepped into the cool desert night, I felt the last ties of that house unravel behind me. I didn't know it then, but this was only the beginning of how everything would fall apart. Paradise Valley at night feels like the desert is holding its breath. The houses don't sit on streets so much as on stages, and the mountains keep their silhouettes like an audience that refuses to applaud. I watched the palm shadows glide across Grandpa William's windshield as we drove, my suitcase digging into my knees, my throat raw from everything I hadn't meant to say. He didn't talk for the first few miles. He drove like he'd always driven, calm, precise, the way a man moves through a room when he knows exactly who he is. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was heavy with what had just happened, and with the decision he'd made in one clean cut. When he finally spoke, it was to ask the smallest question. "You hungry?" I almost laughed. I hadn't eaten since noon. "A little." "We'll fix that." We passed the old stone church on Lincoln, the one with the bell that only rings on holidays. I stared out the window and let my pulse slow, while the city lights turned into something softer. I didn't cry. Not yet. I think I was afraid that if I started, I'd cry for 18 years and never stop. Grandpa's house sat behind a low wall of cream stucco and bougainvillea, a place that looked like it had decided long ago to be peaceful and had never changed its mind. He keyed in a code, the gate slid open, and we rolled up a driveway lined with citrus trees. The air smelled like oranges and watered earth. Inside, the floors were cool tile and the lamps were low. No television talking to itself in the corner. Just quiet. He set my suitcase by the stairs and nodded toward the kitchen. "Sit," he said. "I'll warm up the lasagna." "You don't have to." "I want to." He moved like someone who'd lived here long enough to know where everything belonged. Foil, plates, the good parmesan. He poured me water in a heavy glass that felt like it had weight on purpose. I took a sip and realized how dry my mouth was. While the oven hummed, he leaned against the counter, arms crossed loosely, and looked at me the way you look at a person you're trying to see past their bruises. "I owe you an apology," he said. I blinked. "For what?" "For not paying closer attention. For sending money and assuming that meant the problem was solved." His jaw tightened. "I believed what I wanted to believe. That they were raising you with fairness. That they were better than this." The word "sending money" pressed against my ribs. "How much?" "Enough to keep their accounting firm from going under. Enough to pay for that party," he said, nodding at the balloons and the string lights that were probably still glowing in our backyard. I thought I was helping the family. I won't make that mistake again. The timer beeped. He plated the lasagna, added a handful of salad, and sat across from me at the kitchen table. We ate in a quiet that didn't feel fragile. It felt sturdy, like a roof in a storm. Halfway through the plate, my phone lit the table. Mom, then Dad, then a flurry of texts from numbers I recognized as aunts and cousins. The message previews a chorus of, "Are you okay?" and "Call me when you can." I flipped it face down. "You don't have to decide tonight," he said. "You don't have to decide anything tonight." I nodded, and that was when the first tear slid down without my permission. He didn't reach across the table or tell me it would be all right. He handed me a linen napkin like it was a tool and looked away until I'd finished. When we were done, he showed me the guest room at the end of the hall. The bedspread was white, the bedside lamp a soft gold, the window opening toward a slice of moon and the dark slope of Camelback Mountain. "This is yours as long as you want it to be," he said. "Tonight, this week, this year." "Through college?" I asked, half joking, half prayer. He didn't smile to be charming. "Through college." Before he left me to the shower and the drawer of spare toothbrushes, he paused. "In the morning, we'll sort practicals. A call to the school. Maybe a visit to the mall. You'll need some things you didn't have time to pack. And I'll speak with your parents." Something in my stomach tightened. "You don't have to talk to them." "I do," he said. "Not to negotiate, to draw a line." He kept his promise. At 8 a.m., he called from the patio while I sat inside with a mug of coffee that tasted like the first kind thing anyone had done for me in weeks. I couldn't hear their side of it, only his. Measured, unarguable. "No," he said early in the call. "Not a discussion, an ending." A pause. "Financially, yes." Another pause. "Because you have failed the simplest test of parenthood. You have made one child pay for another's comfort." He listened for a long time without speaking. Once, his eyes found mine through the glass and softened, as if to say, "I'm here." When he finally hung up, he didn't look triumphant. He looked resolved. The way a judge looks when a verdict disappoints him, but he knows it's correct. "They're going to try different tactics," he said, returning to the kitchen. "Guilt first, then anger, then something they'll call reason." He picked up his coffee and sat. "We'll treat all three as weather. You don't negotiate with thunder. You wait for it to pass." I told him I needed to stop by the house for a few more things. My notebooks, the bracelet Grandma gave me, the stupid sweatshirt I hate but always wear when I'm sick. He insisted we go together. Driving back in daylight made last night feel like a dream with sharp edges. The front door opened before we reached it. Mom's face was blotchy from crying. Dad's was set in the stubborn mask that says, "I am the injured party." "Ava," Mom said, reaching for me. "Baby, we were—" Grandpa stepped between us politely, like a man stepping between a match and a curtain. "She's here to pack. We won't be long." Dad's voice rose. "William, this is ridiculous. She assaulted her sister." I felt heat flare in my cheeks. Grandpa didn't look at me. He kept his eyes on Dad. "I watched your older daughter conduct a campaign of entitlement from the moment I walked in. If you want to talk about assaults, we can talk about 18 years of smaller ones." Amanda descended the stairs like a misunderstood princess, a thin red mark on her cheek, where my hand had said the thing my mouth couldn't. "Grandpa," she whispered, eyes glossed with practiced pain. "Please don't do this. I made a mistake. I was upset. I'm upset now. Look at me." He did look, not cruelly, just clearly. "You've been upset so long it's become your hobby." Her mouth fell open, but no protest came out. We went upstairs. In my room, the fairy light glow from last night still rimmed the mirror. I pulled open drawers and filled a second bag, the notebooks, the Polaroids that proved I'd existed, a shoebox with 3 birthday cards Grandma had written in her neat, old-fashioned cursive. Mom hovered in the doorway, asking me to please just talk, please just understand, please see how fragile your sister is right now. "I turned 18, I said. "That's fragile too." I expected the house to break my heart as I left it. It didn't. It looked exactly the same as it had my whole life, shiny where it wanted to be seen, dusty in all the corners that mattered. I took one last look at the backyard, at the banner that had been taken down and rolled into a defeated tube on the counter. 18 and fearless blinked up at me from the plastic like a dare. I tucked it into my bag. At the door, Dad tried one more time. "If you walk out, there's no coming back. Not after the things you told him, not after the money you cost us." There it was, not subtle, not even wrapped. Grandpa opened the door. Ava, he said gently, like my name was a bridge. Ready? I was. We left without slamming anything. The sound of restraint. Back at his house, he set my bags in the closet and gave me a key. You'll need this, he said. It says what I want you to hear even when I'm not in the room. You belong. I didn't realize until later how badly I needed those words. They fit in my pocket with a weight that steadied me. The day unfolded like a first draft of a life I could stand to read. We drove to school and met with the guidance counselor, who didn't ask me to minimize, who said the word safety like it meant me, not the quiet of our living room. We had lunch at a diner where the waitress called me honey and slid me an extra orange slice with my club sandwich. At home, Grandpa showed me how to work the pool cover and where the spare towels live, and what time the hummingbirds come to the feeder if no one bothers them. The text began mid-afternoon, a string of apologies from Mom that sounded copy-pasted from a parenting blog, a single, sharp message from Dad. You manipulated him. We needed that support. Amanda sent a photo of herself with the caption, "Is this what you wanted?" She'd angled the light so the faint mark on her cheek looked theatrical. I stared at the screen until it blurred. Then I turned the phone off. At dusk, we ate on the patio. The sky went lavender. A breeze came up that smelled like wet stone. Grandpa said, "Tomorrow, we'll think about college applications, or scholarships, or absolutely nothing if that's what you need. Tonight, you rest." Okay. He studied me for a moment, then nodded once, as if signing a document only he could see. This house has had many duties, he said. Tonight it learns a new one. What's that? Being yours. It would be comforting to say that peace settled in like a cat and slept at my feet. Instead, I lay awake and listened to the desert be quiet in 1,000 small ways, the drip of the irrigation, the soft buzz of the pool light, the occasional car that sounded like it was driving through someone else's story. When I finally slept, I dreamed of the banner unrolling across the night sky. My name written in a font that didn't apologize for itself. In the morning, the phone would light up again. The apologies would sour. The tactics would shift. What had been "please come home" would calcify into "you owe us." And behind both of my parents' voices, I'd hear something else moving, a plan forming, a lever they thought they could pull. But that was tomorrow's storm. Tonight, the house learned my name. The first week at Grandpa's house felt like standing in a sunlit photograph that hadn't yet begun to fade. Mornings were quiet, the kind of quiet that hummed instead of ached. I'd wake up to the smell of coffee drifting through the hallway, the sound of the paper being folded, and sometimes the faint crackle of a radio playing old jazz. He'd already left a note by the kitchen counter most days. Neat, block handwriting. Work in the study till noon. There's fruit in the fridge. Don't forget breakfast. That kind of tenderness felt foreign, not loud, not dramatic, just steady. I started to believe that maybe I could build something here, a life made of small consistencies instead of constant crisis, until the texts began to multiply. The first one came 3 days after we left. Mom, we're so sorry, sweetheart. We realize we made mistakes. We just want to talk. Then another. Dad, Amanda feels terrible. She's been crying every night. Can we please move past this? And another. Mom, you know we love you both. You've always been our strong one. That's why we thought you could handle things better than Amanda. I read that line 3 times. You've always been our strong one. It was clever, a trap disguised as praise. If I responded, I'd step right back into the role they'd written for me since birth. The calm daughter, the rational one, the girl who forgives because she's mature enough to do it. I didn't reply, not that day, not the next. When I finally showed the messages to Grandpa, he scanned them once, then handed my phone back. They'll try logic next, he said, when guilt stops working. He wasn't wrong. By the end of the week, Mom's tone had shifted from tender to transactional. Mom, your father and I have been thinking, maybe we can all meet at that Italian place you like. No drama, just family. Dad, we're willing to make amends, but this can't go on. It's hurting your sister. Their concern always had a target, and it was never me. One evening, I was in the backyard, sketching out college essay ideas, when my phone buzzed again. This time, from an unfamiliar number. It was Amanda. Amanda, we need to talk, alone, no Grandpa, no audience. I stared at the message, half expecting it to explode. I didn't reply. An hour later, Amanda, you've made your point, Ava. Everyone feels sorry for you now. You can stop playing the victim. I nearly laughed out loud. Playing the victim. That was her favorite phrase, her shield against any accountability. I left my phone on the patio table and went inside. Grandpa was reading in the den, glasses perched low on his nose. "You look like you're about to set something on fire," he said without looking up. "I'm just thinking," I replied. "About what?" "About whether people like my parents actually believe their own lies, or if they just repeat them long enough that truth stops mattering." He closed his book. "That's the thing about self-deception. It's not stupidity, it's maintenance. Some people can't live without their illusions." He leaned back. "So, what's your plan?" "I'm going to give them one last chance, but on my terms." He smiled faintly, the corner of his mouth lifting in approval. "Good. Just make sure it's a test they can fail." That night, I drafted the message carefully. AVA. I'll consider meeting if, and only if, Amanda moves out of the house. She's 23. She can afford her own place. If you choose to keep her there, that tells me everything about your priorities. I didn't expect them to agree. I just wanted to watch the silence stretch between us, the kind of silence that exposes truth. 2 days passed. Nothing. Then a third. Still nothing. That silence said more than any apology could. Life in Paradise Valley kept moving forward. Grandpa helped me look up scholarship applications for Arizona State and Northern Arizona University. We cooked together, his lasagna recipe becoming a weekly ritual. Some nights we'd watch To Kill a Mockingbird or 12 Angry Men, and he'd pause the film to explain courtroom logic, how people reveal themselves when they think they're winning an argument. I listened closely, because deep down, I knew the real trial was coming. When it did, it started quietly, with a knock on the front gate. I was walking home from Chaparral High with Ethan, my boyfriend. We'd been together for nearly a year, long enough for him to have seen the cracks in my family, but not long enough to understand just how deep they ran. He'd been my anchor during the chaos, steady and grounded, the kind of person who didn't need to talk to make you feel safe. As we reached the gate, I noticed someone leaning against a silver Honda parked down the street. Even from a distance, I knew the posture, the arms folded across her chest, the head tilted with practiced nonchalance. Amanda. She looked completely out of place against the calm backdrop of the neighborhood. Designer sunglasses, too much perfume, and that brittle smile she wore like armor. Ethan glanced at me. "You want me to stay?" "Yeah," I said, "please." We walked toward the house, pretending not to see her, but she stepped away from the car and called out, "Ava!" I froze. Ethan whispered, "Ignore her." But she kept going. "So this is what you do now? Hide behind Grandpa's money and your little boyfriend?" Her tone was sharp, but underneath it, fear. The kind that comes from losing control. I turned slowly. "What do you want, Amanda?" "I just want to talk, privately." She shot Ethan a look. "Without the bodyguard." "Then you're out of luck," I said, "because I'm done having private conversations with people who weaponize them later." She took a step closer. "You're tearing the family apart. Mom's been crying nonstop. Dad can't sleep. And it's all because of your ridiculous ultimatum." I crossed my arms. "You mean the one where I asked you to move out and take responsibility for yourself?" "Yeah, that one." Her jaw tightened. "You actually expect them to kick me out of my own home? You're insane, Ava. Jealous and vindictive and—" "Stop," I said, cutting her off. "Do you remember what you told Mom on my birthday? If I can't have fun, then neither should she." Her eyes flickered. "What does that have to do with—" I took a step forward. "Everything. Because you still believe it. You can't stand the idea of anyone being happy if it's not you." Ethan stood a few feet behind me, quiet but alert. Amanda's voice rose, shrill with disbelief. "You think you're better than me now, living in Grandpa's house like some charity case?" "No," I said calmly. "Just safer." Something in her face broke, then she lunged. It wasn't graceful. It was pure, blind emotion. She shoved me hard enough that I stumbled back against the gate. Before she could swing again, Ethan was between us, his voice steady but lethal. "Back off, Amanda." She struggled against him, screaming, "You don't get to take my sister from me." I straightened, brushing the dust from my jeans. "You never had me." Then, and I still don't know where it came from, I slapped her. Not out of rage, but clarity. The sound cracked through the air, sharp and final. Her expression flickered between shock and fury, but she didn't move again. Ethan loosened his grip and stepped aside. "You should leave," he said. Amanda stared at me, breathing hard. "You're going to regret this." "Maybe," I said, "but not tonight." She turned and stalked back to her car, slamming the door so hard the echo chased her down the street. That night, I told Grandpa everything. The confrontation, the shove, the slap. He listened, hands folded, expression unreadable. When I finished, he exhaled through his nose and said, "You did well." "I hit her," I whispered. "You defended your boundary. Sometimes the world only hears the sound of a door when it's slammed." He leaned forward, his gaze steady. "You're not a child anymore, Ava. You're someone who can make choices. You just made one." Outside, the desert wind picked up, carrying with it the faint smell of rain. Somewhere, I knew, my parents were scrambling, drafting their next strategy, figuring out how to pull the right emotional strings. But something in me had shifted. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of the storm. Because for the first time, I wasn't standing in their house waiting for it. The morning after Amanda showed up, I woke to the low murmur of voices on the patio. Grandpa was already up, reading the newspaper, the phone pressed to his ear. Through the sliding glass door, I could hear him say, "She's fine, and she's staying that way." Then he hung up, folded the paper, and looked at me. "Your parents know about the fight," he said evenly. "They're spinning their version to the rest of the family." Of course they were. I could almost hear it. Ava attacked Amanda again. We're worried about her mental state. The golden child needed her halo polished, and I was their favorite scapegoat. "They'll start making you look like the villain," Grandpa added, pouring me coffee. "They're terrified of how the truth sounds when it's spoken plainly." I smiled weakly. "Then they're right to be scared." He handed me the mug. "Let them be. The truth doesn't need defending, it just needs space to breathe." That space didn't last long. 2 days later, I was sitting in the school library when my phone vibrated with a series of new messages, one after another, relentless. "Mom, we've thought about your condition. It's unreasonable, Ava. We can't just throw your sister out. But we're willing to discuss other compromises. Dad, you need to stop involving your grandfather in family matters. He's making things worse." Amanda, "You think you won? You're pathetic. You've always been jealous of me, and everyone sees it now." I muted the thread and stared out the window at the dusty field beyond the parking lot. The air shimmered above the asphalt, the kind of heat that bends everything out of shape. That's when Ethan appeared beside me, placing a Gatorade on the table. "You've been reading those messages for 15 minutes, he said. "Maybe it's time to stop." I forced a smile. "I'm fine." He sat across from me, leaning in. "You don't have to pretend with me." Something about his voice, calm, certain, made me drop the mask. "They're never going to stop, are they?" He shook his head slowly. "People like that only stop when you stop reacting." I already stopped replying. That's not the same as being free. He was right. Silence can be armor, but it can also be a leash if you're still waiting for the next tug. That night, Grandpa and I sat on the back patio, watching the last streaks of sunset fade over Camelback Mountain. He had his usual cup of mint tea. I had a notebook open, but hadn't written a word. "You know," he said quietly, "I used to think your mother's problem was weakness, that she couldn't stand up to your sister's tantrums. But I was wrong. It's not weakness, it's convenience. She found it easier to feed the noise than to face the silence." I looked at him. "Do you regret cutting them off?" He thought for a long moment before answering. "Regret isn't the right word. It's more like grief. You can mourn people who are still alive, but you don't go back to the grave and try to bargain with it." I wrote that down without even realizing it. You can mourn people who are still alive. It stuck with me. The next morning, a message came through that stopped me cold. "Dad, we'll do anything to make this right. Just tell us what it would take for you to come home, and talk to Grandpa about giving us another chance." I stared at those words for a long time. "We'll do anything." That was the crack I had been waiting for, the moment when desperation stripped the lie bare. I showed it to Grandpa. He read it, exhaled slowly, and said, "Careful, Ava. This is bait." "I know," I said, "but I think I'm done being the fish." I typed my reply slowly, deliberately. "Ava, if you want me back, let Amanda move out. She's 23. She can support herself. Choose what matters more, her comfort or your integrity." I didn't send it for their answer. I sent it for their silence. And silence is exactly what I got. Days passed, then a week. Not a single message, not even from Amanda. It was like the whole family had collectively decided to erase me instead of confronting their guilt. At first, I told myself I didn't care. But on the fourth night, as I lay awake listening to the hum of the ceiling fan, I realized something. Their silence wasn't punishment anymore. It was freedom. Grandpa noticed the shift before I did. "You look lighter," he said over breakfast. "I think I finally understand something," I said. "They weren't keeping me trapped. I was." He nodded. "That's the moment the chains start to rust." But peace doesn't always arrive without echoes. On Friday morning, I got an email, not a text, from Mom. The subject line read Final Decision. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity has always been my worst habit. Ava, your father and I have decided to let Amanda stay with us. We don't appreciate being forced into impossible choices. You've shown us who you are: jealous, manipulative, and disrespectful. We only wanted you back to help smooth things over with your grandfather, but your uncle has agreed to become Dad's new business partner. We don't need that money anymore. Please don't contact us again. Mom and Dad. I read it once, then twice. There it was. The truth, stripped of its mask. They didn't even bother pretending anymore. I showed Grandpa the message. He skimmed it and let out a quiet chuckle. Well, he said, they've finally stopped lying. That's progress. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel sad. I just felt done. I blocked their numbers, archived their emails, and deleted every photo on my phone that made me look like I belonged in that house. A week later, I received one more message, the last one they'd ever send before I blocked the account completely. You're a horrible, heartless, violent girl. After everything we did for you, you still turned your back on your own family. Don't bother reaching out when you realize you've made a mistake. I didn't answer. I just stared at the screen until the words blurred, then hit block. The silence that followed wasn't empty this time. It was peaceful. That weekend, Ethan and I went hiking along the Chawla Trail. The air was dry and golden, the rocks warm under our hands. He didn't ask about the messages. He didn't need to. Halfway up, he stopped and turned toward me. So, what now? I looked at the valley below us, the city I'd spent 18 years trying to please. Now? I said. Now I start over. When we reached the summit, I closed my eyes against the wind and whispered a quiet thank you. Not to my parents, not even to fate, but to the version of me that finally walked away. The girl who'd once waited for permission was gone. The woman who replaced her didn't need any. A month after the last message, the desert began to bloom again. Spring in Arizona has this strange, stubborn beauty. Cactus flowers, pushing through thorns, the air smelling faintly of rain that might never come. It felt poetic somehow, the way life insisted on growing, even after the worst drought. Grandpa said that was a metaphor worth paying attention to. By then, I'd been living with him for 6 weeks. I'd stopped flinching at quiet mornings. I'd learned how to make his coffee just right, 2 sugars, 1 splash of cream, and he'd learned that I liked my eggs over easy. We'd fallen into a rhythm that felt nothing like survival and everything like peace. I was finally truly free. And then life started giving back. The email from Northern Arizona University came one Thursday morning while I was folding laundry. Subject: Congratulations, you're in. I stared at the words for a full minute before they sank in. My acceptance letter with a partial scholarship. When I told Grandpa, he smiled that slow, proud smile that started in his eyes first. Looks like they know a fighter when they see one, he said. He insisted on celebrating that night, dinner at my favorite Mexican restaurant in downtown Scottsdale. Over enchiladas and lime soda, he raised his glass and said, "To fresh starts, and to choosing yourself, which I've learned is harder than choosing anyone else." For once, I didn't deflect. I lifted my glass too. "To the people who taught me how not to be loved," I said quietly, "because they made space for the ones who do it right." He chuckled. "Poetic. You get that from your grandmother." Not long after, I started dating Ethan officially. He came over for dinner one Sunday, nervous, polite, wearing a button-up that didn't fit quite right across the shoulders. Grandpa liked him immediately. The two of them ended up on the patio talking about vintage Mustangs while I cleared the plates. It was strange watching them. 2 men who'd both shown me, in their own ways, what safety looked like: quiet, steady, earned. Later that night, as Ethan walked me to the door, he said, "You know, your grandfather's kind of intimidating." I laughed. "He's supposed to be. Keeps the wrong people away." Ethan smiled. "And lets the right ones stay?" "Exactly." For a while, I didn't hear anything about my parents. It was blissful. But karma has a way of whispering its updates when you least expect them. It started with a text from a cousin I barely knew. Cousin Leela. "Heard about your parents. Is it true your grandfather cut them off completely? Their business is folding?" I didn't respond, but curiosity gnawed at me. That night, Grandpa confirmed it. "They called your aunt last week," he said, pouring tea. "Apparently, their firm lost 3 major clients. They've had to sell the Tempe office and move operations into their home. I'd almost feel sorry for them if I didn't know how they'd earned it." I didn't feel sorry either, just peaceful. Like justice had its own quiet clock, and it was finally ticking on my time. A few days later, I heard that Amanda had finally moved out. She'd rented a one-bedroom apartment in Tempe. Not glamorous, not awful, just ordinary. Word was, she'd started working as a freelance social media consultant, which was her way of saying she posted ads for local boutiques and called it a career. For once, nobody was applauding. Meanwhile, my life kept expanding. I started classes at NAU that fall, psychology major, just like I'd dreamed. The campus was crisp with mountain air, and the red maples along the quad looked like they'd been painted just for me. I joined a writing workshop, started volunteering at a crisis helpline, and learned that healing wasn't something you finished. It was something you practiced. On weekends, Ethan would drive up from Phoenix, and we'd spend hours walking through Flagstaff's little downtown, eating at diners with mismatched chairs, and talking about everything we still wanted to be. It felt strange to realize that I no longer looked over my shoulder when I laughed. One afternoon in early October, I got a call from Grandpa. His voice was calm but softer than usual. "I found something for you," he said, "in your grandmother's old cedar chest." When I got home that weekend, he handed me an envelope yellowed with time. On the front, in Grandma's neat cursive, it said, "For Ava, when she's finally ready." Inside was a letter, dated the week before she died. "My dearest Ava, if you are reading this, you've already learned something that takes most people decades to understand. Love is not proven by sacrifice. You can give and give until you disappear, and the wrong people will still say it wasn't enough. The right people won't ask you to vanish at all. Stand tall, my girl. You come from a long line of women who refuse to stay quiet." Grandma rose. I read it twice, then looked at Grandpa. "She always knew you'd need that letter," he said gently. It hit me then, the full weight of it all. The birthday that never happened. The silence that used to suffocate. The rage, the tears, the leaving. Every shattered moment had led to this quiet room, this small miracle of understanding. I wasn't unloved. I'd just been looking in the wrong house for it. The next morning, as I packed to return to school, Grandpa handed me my car keys, but attached to them was a tiny silver key I didn't recognize. "What's this?" I asked. He smiled. "It's for the storage unit behind the house. Your grandmother's easel is in there, along with her camera and a few things she never sold. I think you'll find something worth keeping." He paused. "And maybe it's time for you to start building your own collection of memories." I hugged him then, really hugged him. The kind of hug that feels like forgiveness, not just for someone else, but for yourself. When I drove back toward Flagstaff that afternoon, the sky was wide and reckless with light. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like someone escaping. I felt like someone arriving. And as the desert stretched out behind me, I realized something simple but profound. Freedom isn't about leaving people behind. It's about no longer needing them to understand why you did. I thought about that canceled birthday, the one that started it all. The string lights, the empty yard, the cake that never got eaten. I smiled, because in a way, that night hadn't ruined me. It had rewritten me. The girl who once waited for her family to show up finally learned how to celebrate herself. And this time, everyone who mattered was already here.